Ladies and gentlemen, you might want to get into your bomb shelters, because this guy is going to land some nukes of facts, information, and truth. Introducing my 7-year neighbor and my biggest best friend, KASEY WELLS!
Hey, thank you, Kaleb Krug.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. All right, folks, I'm your 2020 write-in independent presidential candidate, and thank you for the introduction again. And as he said, we're going to drop some knowledge about the Rockefellers here today. So let me get into this. So right now in America, we're dealing with a gigantic wealth gap that keeps getting larger every day. It's a war of wealth, the 1% against the 99%. And I'm here to do something to help alleviate us from slavery, to set us free, to end the Federal Reserve, and to develop a new type of economic system where we are no longer held down by debt slavery. And so I already kind of spoiled it. I told you who we're talking about, but some people call them the plutocrats, some people call them oligarchs, some people call them the financial aristocracy, some people call them the ruling class, some people call them the ruling elite, others call them the shadow government, some people refer to them as globalists, others call them internationalists, some even call them the Illuminati, some even call them the incredibly evil empire just east of the Hudson River, while others just call them the lizard people or Team Evil. But if we continue to give these people faceless titles, we're never going to be able to solve the problems that they have created. So from now on, let's just say Rockefeller. Call them Rockefellers. There's many of them. They have names. There's like David, or John D. Sr., John D. Jr., David Sr., David Jr., and hundreds more. Oh, and also, many of them are serving as board of directors on many of the family philanthropies I have listed down here, like the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Rockefeller Family Fund, the David Rockefeller Fund, or the David Rockefeller Global Development Fund. There's many more.
What do they all do? What do they all do?
Oh, okay. I'll tell you. I'm going to get to that. Well, I'll just tell you right now. What the main thing that these organizations do, they give conditional grants. Conditional grants to different organizations, non-government organizations, or think tanks, with stipulations that give directives on how that money is to be used. And oftentimes, our public policy is directed by them because they give money to different organizations with stipulations that say, use this for these different purposes. And that is carried out in so many different ways. But the reason I'm running for president in 2020 is to do something about how that affects public policy. And so you can accept this or you can reject it, you can absorb it or you can deflect it. You can say, KASEY, is it really that simple? Is it much more complex? I would say it's both, but just let me tell you the rest. You can either take my word for it or go research this for yourself. So it all started back in the late 1800s when John D. Rockefeller and his Standard Oil monopoly, as it was in the oil industry, was growing. Eventually our government stepped in and had him split up his monopoly into 34 different companies. You probably can't see it because the image is a little washed out right here, but on this Statue of Liberty I have many of the different oil subsidiaries today that are from the original Standard. I'll tell you a few. There's Exxon, ExxonMobil, Arco, Texaco, ConocoPhillips, Phillips 66, 76, Gulf, BP, Marathon, Shell, Chevron, Citgo, Amoco, and so on. And so also a lot of wealth and power was married into their family. Some of the most notable families would be the Stillman family. John D.'s brother, William Avery Rockefeller's 2 sons, married James Stillman's 2 daughters, and he was heavily involved with Citibank and many different railroads. And so all this wealth and power was born into their family. And on the political side, John D.'s one son, John D. Jr., married Nelson Aldrich, the guy that wrote the pamphlets that became the Federal Reserve System, married his daughter, so this political power was born into their family too. So this is how their wealth and power perpetuated through family marriages. But it all started with Standard Oil. Then he founded Rockefeller Financial Company, which I believe is behind the Federal Reserve System, and then Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, which was similar to Standard Oil in the way, but he said managing philanthropy as if it were a business. But he was the most ruthless businessman of all time, so if you could imagine how he applied philanthropy in a business mindset. That'll give you some idea of like how ruthless their philanthropies have gone on to control the world as well. He also founded the University of Chicago later. Him and his son got the Rockefeller Foundation going. And as those philanthropies grew, today 6 of the most powerful think tanks in the world are all funded by multiple Rockefeller family philanthropies, like the Brookings Institution, the Chatham House, the Carnegie Council, the Council on Foreign Relations, Rand Corporation, and so on. So after philanthropy got going, they got into education, then economics, and then pharmaceutical industry. They founded Rockefeller University. General Education Board, if you don't know much about that, you should look that up. That's probably one of the most racist organizations I ever heard of, but it was involved in agriculture and so on. They got involved in industrial agriculture, the Green Revolution, printing money, currency with the Federal Reserve System. The Council on Foreign Relations is the most treasonous organization I ever heard of. But then also the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. If you didn't know it, that Kaiser Wilhelm Institute was the premier organization during World War II that directed the type of programs that were to go on, or medical experiments that were done in concentration camps in World War II. And without the funding of the Rockefeller Foundation, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute would have never existed. And so a lot of those atrocities committed in those concentration camps would have never happened. And so they fund both sides of war. Or in World War II, also they were invested into United States Steel, of course Standard Oil subsidiaries, IBM, IG Farben, which is now Bayer, but they were involved in both sides, so they were profiting from both sides of war. Later, they founded the Rockefeller Foundation. 3 of the big 6 major media corporations are located in the Rockefeller Center, if you didn't know that, and that's probably why you'll never hear about me, or why a lot of independent candidates don't get heard, because they control a large part of the mainstream media. Also, their money was behind the foundations of the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, and so on. And so how this plays out into my local community goes like this. This is one thing that gets me so upset. When I'm talking about separating these public-private partnerships, that's really what I want to do as president, involved in the economic development agenda that's going on around the country. There's an economic development council in every county in my state, and years ago our city was putting in a new sewer system. And so, well, hold on, before I get to that, let me tell you about the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and what their primary objective whenever they were established was. From 1956 to 1960, this fund financed an ambitious study conceived by its president, Nelson Rockefeller, to define the major problems and opportunities facing the U.S. and to clarify national purposes and objectives, and to develop principles which could serve as the basis for future national policy. So they were involved in trying to direct national policy for, since the 50s basically. And I went online years ago and I downloaded from 2003 to about 2018 now, all the grants that the Rockefeller Brothers Fund have given out since during that time. They give out thousands a year. And I did the same with the Rockefeller Foundation. I put all that into a PDF that I could then...
But Casey, but this is all big talk. Don't the viewers will understand if it's like lots of small talk? Well, they don't know what the app is.
Okay, good point. Okay, so let me just say how that relates to my local community. So I went down to our local Economic Development Council, and I interviewed our local CEO of this Economic Development Council, which my mayor was on the board of directors for at the time. And I asked him where he gets his stomping orders, and he said, we get it from the International Economic Development Council. Then I went online and searched that and found the Rockefeller Brothers Fund the International Economic Development Council. And I found they also fund the National League of Cities, and they ordered these 2 guys to get together to write this PDF called The Role of Locally Elected Officials in Economic Development. Also over here, you can see they've donated to Citizens United, and they've also given to the Committee for Economic Development for its Money in Politics campaign. Money in Politics. That's the initiative of the grant. Okay, and how is that small talk? This is really hard, buddy, but I'll try. Okay.
Try to talk slow, friend.
All right.
Slow.
Oh, slow it down?
Yeah, it's like maybe some of the viewers can't understand what you're saying.
Okay, hold on, let me take a pause. I'll be right back. Okay, slow it down a little. What my main point is why this is a conflict of interest is because I went online and I looked up the International Economic Development Council's board member handbook. And I found back in the back of the book, there's this thing called the duty of loyalty, duty of care. And I read that, and it says, by assuming office or accepting appointment, an IEDC director appoints personal allegiance to the enterprise and acknowledges the best interests of the council and its members prevail over any individual interest of his own or those of any other party. Now, when I went and interviewed Marty Vanegas, he's right here from our local Economic Development Council, he wouldn't give me any information about this organization, even though our city donates to it, other local cities donated to it. They take public money. There's about 11 public officials here on this Economic Development Council of the 45 board members. But even though they're so involved in taking public money and have public officials here, they are still a private council. And he told me, we're a private council. I don't have to give you any information. So I couldn't get their board members handbook, but I got the ones who they take their stopping orders from. I got that board members handbook online. So I can only assume that this duty of loyalty, duty of care also applies to them. And if that is true, over here's what I got to tell you. On this side, well, here's all the corporate investors into that Economic Development Council. And I started to chart from 2006 to 2010 as our mayor was involved with this Economic Development Council, our annual city spending that went to corporations that were involved in this Economic Development Council. And every year, more and more of our annual city spending went towards corporations, or these corporations were awarded the government contracts for the redevelopment projects that were going on in our town. And a lot of that money that was awarded for those redevelopment projects came from our TIF spending, and our TIF money is our real estate tax dollars. Now, if that's our real estate tax dollars, we, the people of this town, should have a say in how those redevelopment projects and initiatives go. And that's why I'm running for president, is to try to implement technology for direct democracy, to give people an opportunity to have a say in how their local economic development initiatives go about, as to serve local interests, not these corporate interests that oftentimes go back to serve these international interests. So it's about separating the private sector and the public sector as far as public-private partnerships go in the economic development industry. And so also in this International Economic Development, the board members handbook, is said in there that this this organization will determine who wins and who loses in the international marketplace. Meaning, internationalists are going to come out ahead with these economic development agendas, and local businesses, small businesses, are going to come out on the other end. So this is here to let you guys know and understand why the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And this is the system that I'm saying is further perpetuating that. And that is something I greatly want to do something about, and I can't think of any other position I could take on other than being President of the United States to do something about that. Alright, I guess I'll leave it there for now. We'll get into more of this later. But hey, Logan, I want to thank you for that. Or I mean, Caleb, Logan's his brother. Forgive me, brother. I'm
okay.
So sorry. Alright,
okay.
Do you want to part it out with any closing words?
Yeah, I do. Put in the comment section. 2020 KASEY Wells for president. Have a good day. Okay. That's all.